he walked back into the light, he looked uncomfortable in a way I hadn't seen before. He said he heard a whistle come from somewhere farther in the woods right after he stepped away from the fire. It started off like every normal camping trip does, just two of us trying to find somewhere isolated enough to stay for the night before it got too dark. This was out near Blackwater Falls in West Virginia, sometime in early September, and it was just me and Ethan. We had been driving around looking for somewhere quiet to camp for one night before heading back the next morning, and eventually we found this spot a little way off one of the side trails where people had clearly camped before because the ground was flattened out, and there were old fire marks scattered around the area. We got there late enough that it was already starting to get dark under the trees, so we set everything up pretty quickly and kept things simple, just a small fire and some cheap food heated over it while we talked for a couple hours. And for most of that time, everything felt normal. But after a while, Ethan mentioned he kept smelling cigarette smoke, even though there shouldn't have been anybody else camping close to us. And once he said it, I started noticing it too, not constantly, just every few minutes, like somebody nearby had taken one drag and then stopped. And the strange part was it never came from the same direction twice. At first we figured it was probably another campsite deeper through the trees, but after a while it started feeling wrong, because sometimes the smell would drift from somewhere behind us, and then a few minutes later it would come from farther off to the left. And once it smelled close enough that I actually looked around expecting somebody to walk into the firelight. Nobody ever did. Around maybe 10 or so, Ethan grabbed his flashlight and walked off a short distance to take a piss, while mine stayed sitting on a flat rock beside the fire. And after maybe 20 feet, I heard him stop moving completely before he called back asking if I had whistled at him from the campsite. I told him no, and when he walked back into the light, he looked uncomfortable in a way I hadn't seen before. He said he heard a whistle come from somewhere farther in the woods right after he stepped away from the fire, like somebody trying to get his attention without yelling. And we joked about it at first because neither of us wanted to turn it into a whole thing. But maybe 20 minutes later, both of us heard the same whistle again. This time it came from behind the tent. Just one short note. Ethan stood up immediately and aimed the flashlight toward the trees, and I remember the beam catching part of somebody's leg for maybe half a second before it disappeared behind a tree trunk. We started yelling, asking who was there, but nobody answered. And after that, the woods went completely quiet again, except for the fire popping once in a while, and neither of us really knew what to do after that, because leaving over something that small felt stupid, but staying suddenly felt worse. Then the whistle happened again, closer this time, right beside the tent. And Ethan moved toward the sound, while I stayed near the fire. And the second he reached the side of the tent, something sprinted through the dark behind him. only caught pieces of it between the trees, a man wearing something pale over his face. We both ran for the car at the same time after that, throwing gear everywhere trying to leave. And I remember Ethan fumbling the keys badly enough that he dropped them once between the seats before the engine finally started. Neither of us talked much. Once we got back onto the main road, and maybe 10 minutes later, Ethan suddenly asked if I had packed the second flashlight from the campsite. I told him no, because when we left, both flashlights had still been outside with us near the fire.